Thank you. Welcome to this meeting of the Connected Communities Scrutiny Committee being held on Tuesday the 3rd of June 2025. For those present in the meeting room, if the fire alarm sounds, please leave the building by the nearest exit and make your way to the fire assembly point in the car park. The agenda papers and other relevant information for this meeting are available for public viewing on the Herefordshire Council website. The Council is streaming this meeting live on the Herefordshire Council YouTube channel and is making a recording. Others are permitted to film, photograph and record public meetings, providing it does not disrupt the business of the meeting. If there are any members of the public present who do not wish to be filmed or photographed, please raise your hand now so that any such person filming or photographing may be made aware. For participants in the room, please raise your hand to indicate that you wish to contribute. When invited to speak, please press the button on the right of the microphone unit and speak directly towards the microphone, and please remember to turn off your microphone once you've finished speaking. Please ensure that mobile phones, laptops and other devices are turned to silent. For participants in attendance remotely, I think there will be one or two today, can I request that you use the raise hand feature within the system if you wish to contribute and to introduce yourself when called upon to do so. Please note that only committee members present in the meeting room may vote. I understand apologies for absence have been received from committee members Councillor Diana Toynbee and Councillor Elizabeth Foxton. And Councillor Justin Pebbody is present at as the name substitute for Councillor Diana Toynbee, and Councillor Liz Harvey is present as the name substitute for Councillor Elizabeth Foxton. I also understand we've received apologies from Sarah Lee, who is unfortunately unable to join us today. Declarations of interest. Do any members wish to declare any interests in the agenda? Right. Minutes. The minutes document of the meeting held on the 12th of March 2025 is included in the agenda at pages 13 to 20. No matters of accuracy have been notified to the monitoring officer. Are you all content that I sign the minutes as an accurate record? Yep. All those in favour that were here? Thank you. Okay. The committee has received 3 questions from members of the public, and responses to the questions have been published in supplement 2 to the agenda. The questioner has the opportunity to submit a written supplementary question or to join the meeting to ask their supplementary question. Supplementary questions are to be no more than 1 minute in length and must include a question. Can I ask the clerk to confirm if any supplementary questions are to be asked?
Mr. Milne is present in the meeting room and has indicated an intention to ask a supplementary question. So step forward and please ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Milne.
The Chair declined my substantive question relating to item 8 of today's agenda when he was asked how he would guide this committee to considering certain omissions of the strategic environmental assessment. The Golden Valley Parkway rail project being one, but more obviously the proposed Western Bypass. Omitted from the strategic environmental assessment, the claimed positive effects scores for climate change, healthy behaviour, inclusivity, safety and the environment for this motor-only road, on which the local transport plan is largely based, cannot be relied upon. Therefore, I now respectfully ask members directly to consider this ahead of any recommendations they may make. And obviously, this doesn't require a response till you get to item 8. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I refer you to my answer when you gave your original question. We certainly didn't decline your question. I just pointed out that the fundamental role of the Scrutiny Committee is to hold the Executive to account for their actions and policies, and it does this through the interrogation of evidence presented to it. And from its interrogation makes recommendations based on the evidence it has considered, and as such it would have been inappropriate for me to declare any sort of view on the matter or to guide the committee accordingly. But obviously we will consider your opinion when we get to the relevant point, and members will be fully aware of your position. So thank you for attending today. Moving on to questions from members of the council. It's my understanding that no questions have been received from the councillors on this occasion. Moving on to item 7, which is the cultural strategy, the purpose of which is to provide an overview of the Herefordshire Cultural Strategy 2019 to 2029 and to seek views of the Scrutiny Committee on how priorities are being progressed. I understand we do have an introduction to this strategy, and that's going to be given to us today. who will be leading on that? Thank you. Would it be Damien? Thank you.
Morning, committee. I'll be leading on behalf of Sarah, who's sent her apologies. So we were asked to present a report on the Council approach to culture based on the midway point of Herefordshire Cultural Strategy 2019 to 2029. It was adopted several years ago by the Council, but not produced by the Council. The Cultural Strategy is held by Herefordshire Cultural Partnership, who are joined today with Nick and Claire, the Chair and Vice Chair of the committee, of the Cultural Partnership, but also CEOs and executives of their own arts organisations, and they'll speak about the report at some point today. In terms of where we are, the Council supports the Cultural Partnership. The Cultural Partnership is an independent body of arts organisations and funders who work across the county, drawing in strategic and large-scale funding, although the Cultural Partnership itself is unfunded, but has been supported through grants from the Council to the UK SPF funding for the past couple of years. I think I'll make the introduction short enough for you to ask questions. So if you do have any questions, please ask.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I want to start by thanking Sarah and yourself for this extremely comprehensive set of documents that we've been through. It's been extremely helpful. There's a lot gone into it, and I think the report that was done in 2024, that wasn't at the request of this committee, was it? That was already being done. What was the genesis for that report? Can we just explain that briefly, because that does make up a large part of today's meeting. Whoever would like to...
Sorry, so Nick's a bit hard of hearing, so I'm just relaying your question. The 2024 Cultural Survey, which is informing.
Yes, yeah. So want a descriptor of that?
Sorry, Nick, I was interested in the genesis for the report that was done in 2024.
The genesis was that we had reached a point with the cultural strategy for nearly 5 years at that point. It was due for a review. Before we actually reviewed the strategy itself, we felt that there have been so many changes. I have to say, mostly all positive, but externally, we are all aware of certain challenges and shifting landscapes. So the review was really to look at the state of culture and cultural activity and creative industries within the county. I think you've had that report. There were some very striking results from that. The consultants that we employed, Fifth Sector, to do that report, one of the interesting things about them and one of their specialisms is the way in which they were able to scrape and analyse data and going perhaps a lot far more deeply into that, and the consultations that they led resulted in some new data, I think. For example, 4,000 creatives in the county, mostly sole traders and micro businesses, but nevertheless 4,000. The GVA for those findings.
Hold on a second, just to dig into that a second. Now, this is the LinkedIn data that they scraped, as opposed to the ONS data, which showed a significant increase.
Which shows a significant
and
increase.
Is that widely accepted as, is that regarded as an acceptable way to present data using social media profiles?
We understand that it is, but it was took time, and as I say, the methods for doing that were a combination of consultation, surveys, and also data. And I do advise all colleagues around the table to look at that data if possible, and also the salary, the wage levels on that as well was significantly higher. Whether you're a jeweller or a photographer or an artist in the county, it looks very positive. Now there are of course challenges, and that then feeds into the strategy that we are now engaged in developing to address some of those and build on some of those opportunities, but address some of those challenges. Thank you.
Thank you. Just coming back.
Can I just
yes,
add
sorry,
on that?
yeah.
That, often with the traditional data, it just misses very small businesses, which are almost an identifying characteristic of the real nature of this county, that you can operate as a one person in a barn as a side income to a farm, and it's still a valid cultural enterprise, and that's missed in the ONS data.
Thank you, that's very helpful. I just wanted to just take a step back for a second, just looking at the report itself. 17, Damien, maybe you could give me a bit of clarity on this. There was point 9, Herefordshire Council endorsed the cultural strategy 2019 to 2029 on the 15th of October 2020. And then it says on point 17, the expectation is that the updated cultural strategy will be adopted by Herefordshire Council as the formal county cultural strategy. So are we saying at the present time, Damien, that the cultural strategy, has that been formally adopted by Herefordshire Council? Ever?
I don't think it's been endorsed. It's been endorsed, but not formally adopted.
And can you just, for the sake of clarity, what's the difference?
It's a very good question. I think with endorsement as and I have to point out I wasn't the person who presented the paper or was in the council at that time, but I believe it was showing their support, but not necessarily fully adopting its outcomes and its deliverables. So while they support the direction of travel, they haven't signed up to what the report or the strategy at that time was saying it would deliver. I don't know if Nick or Claire could update.
Yes, indeed. Yes, thanks for that question, Ed. It is different in the sense that the endorsement back nearly 5 years ago, we were very pleased for Herefordshire Council to endorse it. That was very important, not only in county, but in terms of external partners and stakeholders. For example, the Arts Council, which are a major investor into arts and culture in the county, were acknowledged that this was something of a step change for Herefordshire Council to be endorsing the cultural strategy. We move forward. The difference then in terms of adopting it does mean that there is a responsibility for delivering that, but also a partnership between the cultural partnership and Herefordshire Council. I was closely involved with working with the Arts Council on a national survey of the Herefordshire Cultural Partnership in Arts Council language is called a cultural compact. Arts Council commissioned a research and a survey of cultural compacts, which was set up when they set up their 10-year strategy. There were 30 compacts around the country that were interviewed, and a report is produced. We can circulate to colleagues that report. One of the key differences within those relationships of those 30 compacts, some compacts were run and managed and delivered by local authorities. Others were a partnership with an independent cultural body, in this case, cultural partnership. And it is the latter relationship that in many ways showed productivity, additional inward investment, and benefits to wider community. So the cultural strategy report wasn't circulated with the papers. It's quite a substantial report, but it can be, and I do advise all of us who are interested in the cultural sector to have a look at that. Herefordshire Cultural Partnership came out very favourably in terms of that those 30 compacts from around the country. I just mentioned that the intent and the ambition for that report for Arts Council is really looking forward for the next 5 years. And as some colleagues will be aware, there is now a national survey of the Arts Council itself, and possibly even DCMS. So the role of cultural compacts going forward is going to be of a critical role in the next 5 years nationally. Thank you.
I think we've got a couple of questions. Councillor Harvey, then Councillor Cornthwaite.
Yes, thank you. And I'm really pleased that we've kind of started with a few questions around how this actually fits in and the relationship of the council to the cultural partnership. I remember coming to the courtyard for the launch of the strategy, and it's really great that we're doing a review at the midpoint. I can kind of understand why the council hasn't sort of formally adopted this, because we are a member of a partnership. And it's interesting to have you say that that partnerships seem to be working better than where councils are saying this is our job to deliver this. So I think we're probably in a good place. Clearly, the cultural sector in Herefordshire is a huge part of our local economy. And for me, what I would be looking for the council to be doing, and I believe that it does, whether it does sufficiently or not, I think is something we might need to be considering. But recognising the element of contribution to the cultural, the actual local economy provided by the cultural sector, and how in economic terms we recognise and reflect that in our economic strategies, how we support the gaining of inward investment through various different routes, and how we work as a member of this partnership, recognising that from what's in our papers, there isn't money changing hands here, but we do need to walk alongside one another. And one of the things that question I've got is, have we got an implementation plan? My sort of business experience is that once you develop a strategy, you say overall, this is what we want to do together. We then say, right, how are we going to do it? And when are we going to do it? And what do we need to do it? So that delivery plan, sort of implementation plan, is the logical next step for me whenever I see a strategy document. So given that we're at the midpoint, how has that implementation plan and coordination, if you like, of resources held discreetly by different partners aligned to walk alongside one another in a way that delivers added value?
Thank you. Do you want to answer that, Nick?
Yes, thank you, and it's a very pertinent question, and quite right. So I think if there is a broad agreement of this, the success of this partnership to date, and a willingness from a colleague from Herefordshire Council to proceed, then I think the next step is to look in more detail at that implementation plan, put in place some of those official relationships, meeting points, points, and then looking at that along with the action plan. I am aware that our Herefordshire Council's officer, Arts Culture officer, is stepping back, and there may or may not be a recruitment process and so on. I think at this point it would also be appropriate to say a thank you to that particular officer. Having worked, dare I say, for about 45 years in Herefordshire in arts and culture, I've seen progress, huge progress over the last few years, and that's largely been...
Can I just stop you there? I think you're straying into a personnel matter, and I'm not sure about anything around that, but thank you for making that point.
In which case, sorry, I think then just to finish, the point would be, the next step would be for an implementation detail to look at that, but very much take on board the points that you've mentioned.
Okay, come back briefly.
Could I just then double check? We're at the midpoint in the period being covered by the strategy at the moment, but so far partners have kind of met where they've met, and it hasn't been a more formally coordinated, shared approach to delivering on the strategy.
I think certainly we can share minutes going back over many, the quarterly board minutes are available. My colleague here administers those and so on. So those are available. I think in terms of where meetings take place and when, there is a success point there in that the board meetings have taken place in different venues, Courtyard, Ledbury Poetry House, and so on. This is, again, an opportunity for those organisations to host and to play a leading part in every board meeting. If Herefordshire Council were taking that step forward into their own strategy, then we would hope that that would continue, but indeed also host meetings and invite members and stakeholders of their own accord as well.
I just want to come in before this. I was thinking of a metaphor for this when I was walking the dog yesterday. You didn't need to know that bit, but I was. And it felt, if a cultural strategy was... Are we still there? Yeah. I was imagining the cultural strategy was a bus, and all the partners are on the bus, either as passengers or drivers. And at the moment, it feels like there's a couple of drivers who maybe determine the direction of the bus. And I think, Nick, you've been a key driver for the cultural strategy. You both have over the past few years. And I've been slightly concerned. Certainly, it's not something, the cultural strategy hasn't been on my radar since I've been a councillor for the last 2 years. I've been slightly concerned that Herefordshire Council is, I think we're supposed to be a passenger on the bus, but I'm a bit concerned our alarm clock hasn't gone off yet and we might have missed it. Is that fair, or am I being unfair on us? Are we an active passenger?
Just to take a step back to Councillor Harvey's question, I think the implementation is by the organisations on their own terms. So while there's direction of travel within the strategy, each organisation of the compact will deliver that in their own way, but within the sort of confines of the strategy. So that's one of the strengths of the compact, is each organisation is separate and individual, but is signed up to deliver this broader strategy. So there isn't a direct single document that sits as an implementation plan across the strategy. And Councillor Driscoll, I think the council in the last couple of years has made a huge effort and investment in culture, and you'll see that in the figures. I think, are we late to the party? Probably yes, but I think you're maybe being a bit unfair where we are at the moment with it.
Sorry, I think certainly in terms of individual flagship projects, I get that completely, and I think, but it's just whether we are helping to drive the whole strategy forward for and with the county. I'm curious to know whether there's a feeling we could be a more active partner.
I think I'll answer first and then pass to colleagues. I would say if you look at the broad offer of the last few years, you'll see a drive in direction based on the strategy. So I think we are delivering the strategy. There are flagships in there, but there's also underlying bits around coordination, around officer support, around supporting through funding, through the grants that we administer. But I think there are some issues. It's not perfect. I'm not saying that, but there has certainly been a change and a drive in the direction over the last few years that hasn't been there over the last 10.
I would just add that Nick now sits on the council's Economy and Growth Board representing culture. That's a positive change. It's positive that we're here today, and we very much appreciate being invited. I think that it's the Herefordshire Cultural Partnership represents culture across the county, and the council are a very important part of our quarterly meetings. And there's other positive things that have happened from the public's perspective, like the public art trail in the city centre with the murals and the hanging sculptures. That has, as the report showed, been hugely positive for the public perspective of the city, feeling a safer and nicer place to be. I think that's a good example of where the council and the partnership have come together. And just sort of going back to Liz's point, I think it's true that the first draft of the strategy had big ambitions but wasn't hard on a delivery plan. Part of the revamp now is to say, let's scrutinise that ourselves. What is the actual action plan with outcomes that we can measure? And where we are at next is to take the draft out and say to people, there's things in here. that say we're going to do X by Y. Do you think you can do that? Can you be responsible for that? And partly our colleague who's absent today is across that with us, and partly people have got to stand up and realise those ambitions. Another thing I've been doing is reviewing our governance and setting up new terms of reference. And within that, it's thinking about who needs to be on the cultural partnership without it becoming so big that it's unwieldy. So one of the two things we're doing is we've invited representatives from all 5 market towns so that we get a much better two-way exchange about what's happening in Ross and Ledbury and other towns. And the other thing we've been doing is working with the team at Mountain Perspective, who are delivering on the Elevate programme, which is giving one-to-one business coaching to these individual organisations who represent the cultural sector, not the national trusts and the biggies, but the grassroots people. And the team at Elevate have actually invested their own money now, significant amounts of money, on top of the SPS funding that kicked it off, so that Elevate can continue. And the cultural strategy can be fed to the people at the grassroots through Elevate. So there's ownership on a community level and not just on a kind of figurehead level.
That's very helpful, thank you. Councillor Cornthwaite, then Councillor Phillips.
It might be that these questions have been asked and answered, but my question was, do you feel supported by Herefordshire Council? Is there more that you could expect from Herefordshire Council? And Herefordshire Council say they have a cultural strategy, but have we farmed it out without taking any responsibility for it? Would be my questions. It was only when I was reading all the documents that I came on page 57. It said work with Herefordshire Council, and I thought I was reading Herefordshire Council's cultural strategy, and I realised in that one sentence it said work with Herefordshire Council to do this. And so that's when I sort of woke up to the idea that actually how much of it is Herefordshire Council's responsibility? How much more do we need to take?
Yes, Frank, it's a good point. I think the first 5 years, the point at where we are at the moment, has been a very positive, from our perspective, a very positive view of how Herefordshire Council have worked over the last 5 years with it, and it brings us to this point today. Going forward, it is a question of whether Herefordshire Council would like to adopt and it become Herefordshire Council, Herefordshire's cultural strategy, and therefore play, and going back to Alyssa's point about implementation and looking at how that works, that would be the next step, or that we continue to work in this partnership with an independent cultural compact, Heritage Cultural Partnership, working closely with, as it has done for the last 5 years, with Herefordshire Council. I just think part of that conversation or that piece of work to reach that point is also looking at the external landscape, looking a little further. We are moving into different territory. We have wherever devolution takes us, we have now a digital ecology that enables creatives and art and the development of creative industries within counties such as Herefordshire that 5, 6, 7 years ago was unthinkable. And the relationship between Birmingham, for instance, the combined authorities, any new alliances of local authorities, including also looking at the Welsh border and with Marches Forward and Shropshire, there is going to be a change over the next 5 years, and continuing the progress we've made and the opportunities we now have, I think actually working together, whether or not that it becomes an adoption, that is a piece of work perhaps that we have to still do. But I do think that the last 5 years have been transformational so far in this partnership.
Councillor Phillips.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it's good to hear those last words of Nick's to say how that is. And I think all of us in the council recognise the important contribution that the cultural sector makes, not only to our economy, but also to our well-being as well, and that's important. And we all recognise, of course, that very small, self-employed, small business, almost as a sort of a lifestyle rather than a business, really, that a lot of people do. And that, of course, creates greater issues when you try and work collaboratively together. And I'm teaching ducks to suck eggs because you know that, and I've known that for years. And I think my first question is, where else do you see sort of the sharing of best practice in other rural areas? Because, we should never invent a wheel. It's always been invented somewhere, and then you may need to alter that. That's my first question. The second question really goes to this Herefordshire Council business, and I declare my rural services network hat here. The total frustration that we have of governments, successive governments, and particularly this current government, and particularly next week, when we see the announcement of our funding for the next 3 years. I hope I'm wrong, but I can see a greater shift of money towards urban areas, again losing us out. And of course, it is the discretionary services that suffer. And it is, and culture comes right in that list. And I get consistently frustrated of talking to urban councillors who talk about festivals that they've organised, and we as a council have done this and all the rest of it. I remember there was a time when I was leader that we did that. We subsidised it in Ross, I remember, for a huge sum of money, which probably was a debatable issue, but we had that capacity. We ain't got that, and I think we've all worked out this side. That's why we've supported but not endorsed, because you can't commit yourself to something genuinely unless you're going to put money behind it and all the rest of it. So I think you've shown a very realistic understanding of the council's position. But I do think that we should use this opportunity to make the point on behalf of ourselves and all rural areas that it is this attack on our ability to deliver those discretionary services that has a huge impact in this area. And rural areas are being done by and harmed by that. And I because we live in an urban country with urban models, we're always going to struggle in that area. But I think we will at this particular time in particular. I welcome the fact that we were talking about partnership with our geography. We've just had Hay Festival. Well, what a pity it didn't, when it moved out of the centre of the town, it moved west. If it had moved east into Cusape, wouldn't that have been brilliant? That would have been excellent, And as it is, I mean, we do claim Hay, of course, for a fortnight in the year, and that's fine. But whatever it takes, the same with Ludlow, same with Cheltenham, or whatever. And the worry that Nick has raised, the issue about future structures in government, I mean, that does not help our cause again. If Shropshire disappear and join Cheshire or Staffordshire, and we're joining Gloucestershire, we're going to have to be constantly vigilant about how you work together, because the whole cultural area needs that collaboration, that working, to get the people here. We know we don't have long stays. We have short stays of people coming. We have huge cultural events, which is important for our local population. But I can see that maybe not having that great influence of local authorities can actually be a benefit. But it's going to cause extra work on those volunteer shoulders who, haven't got that capacity. So my questions really were, where else do you see good examples of working where you can collaborate with? How we're going to deal with this working and cross boundary working in the future?
Thanks, Roger. Yes, I think it is going to be complex, and there is going to be confusion and frustrations and so on. One way of addressing that, I think, and what people take note of further afield, is well-devised initiatives and exemplars that then speak to other areas or other issues and so on. So a fantastic example of Herefordshire Council partnership is Heritage Council's support and investment, modest investment comparatively to the Our Place project recently. It was only, and I worked closely with the Arts Council on building that interest and investment of over £500,000 into the county, but it was the local authority showing its support of that, and particularly through a department of which was creative health as well, and that brought in nearly £750,000. But the purpose of that project is obviously place-based. It is about the communities, about residents and communities benefiting, but also the outcome of, and the intended outcome of that project, which it takes three places, three different poorly understood areas of rural life, a sparsely populated community, a traditional market town, and a rather peri-urban residential area of a rural city. It takes those three areas, and it will, over the course of the project, those communities will put together work that will travel nationally. And that is the intent, and using all the now, I talked about the digital opportunities, but also the physical opportunities to take that as an understanding of a rural county, and taking that, whether that be to Cumbria or to Cornwall or to Lincolnshire. And what by that, you're making that case and right up the chain from local government through to regional and national government of what rural communities are about. Meanwhile, as challenges increase, possibly around housing and quality of life in our urban centres, rural counties will start to look really quite attractive. I speak very personally. I had a phone call the other day from my son. He has a very cool job in London doing these projections across onto huge buildings in London and Dubai and so on. He phones me up. I go, every time he phones me up, I think, is this a Bank of Dad call? And he goes, no, Dad, no, it's fine. But he said, I love London, but I don't see myself actually being able to live and work here all my life. I'd love to be a little close to my family, and I am thinking of going freelance and coming down here. My first step, I took him to Hay Castle and said, look, here's a castle, here, and there's Ludlow Castle. You do Warwick Castle, how about doing it here? All of that. But that I think we will continue to see, particularly if there are hubs and attractive support. Claire mentioned about the Mountain Perspective work. If there are creative hubs in our market towns with some facilities, assets, then we will see creatives, young creatives, and we're all thinking about where does the next generation come from. We are seeing them and we can support them as they are moving. One other point quickly is also we're seeing universities, higher education struggling. The areas we're seeing particularly struggling are in art, culture, to a certain extent humanities. And not only are young people, graduates, coming out saying, what do I do now? But also parents are saying, yes, what do you do now? And you've already got a £30,000 or £40,000 debt as well. I think that we can do a great deal in the skills sector in these counties to give much more employability skills, what used to be called soft skills, into the creative industries in rural areas.
Thank you. I just want to focus, just 1 second, I'll come to you in a second. I just want to focus in a little bit on some of the recommendations. And I've got one eye on the watch, which sure. I do apologise for, but we are somewhat time limited and we do have another major topic to discuss at today's meeting. I was particularly interested in the key findings from the Fifth Sector report. And I was interested to hear your view on how, whether you are in agreement and whether they could form the basis potentially for some recommendations from this committee today. It divides up into 6 different areas: leadership and focus, co-production, vision, ambition, whole county approach, strategic alignment, and investment coordination. I'm going to start with strategic alignment because I think, for me, that's the one that jumped out at me, and I think it's kind of where this conversation's been going. The report identified that there are missed opportunities to align cultural initiatives with broader policy agendas around economic development, health and well-being, and education. The value proposition of culture is not consistently communicated to council stakeholders. The recommendation in the report was that we develop a cross-cutting cultural policy that demonstrates clear links to council priorities by creating a cultural value framework that can be used to articulate benefits across diverse policy areas. Would you agree that that would be a good recommendation for this committee to make today?
Yes.
Thank you. Next. I just want to touch that on, when we're looking at leadership and focus, it said that there's a disconnect between council priorities and cultural sector ambitions, with limited translation between policy goals and creative practice. Basically, the cultural partnership doesn't have capacity. And they evolve the cultural partnership into a more empowered intermediary, potentially taking account of a wider sub-regional geography modelled on successful examples like you asked about this, Roger, the South East Creative Economy Network as an example of something we might morph into. This body should actively engage council leadership, translate between policy and practice, and drive collaborative action. So that's a leadership. I'm thinking that that aligns very well with the strategic alignment recommendation, and that seems to be stupid to have two bodies. Would you agree that those two, that there's a connect there, or connection to be made?
Yes, I do. And Claire mentioned also, though, about the representation now on the Economy and Place Board, and I think that is one means that we would see that cross-sector strategic development and increasing inward investment to this sector.
So the final recommendation was to establish a cultural investment board to oversee major projects, ensure strategic alignment of place-based and sector-focused investment, and maximise spillover benefits across the county. So there's investment coordination with strategic alignment and an evolution of the cultural partnership to grow capacity for the cultural partnership, which it doesn't presently. So I'm not sure what that looks like, but it feels like there's a beast here that is being created of some description that could drive this forward.
Well, for example, the Economy and Place Board, at the last meeting, my first meeting on that, I was very pleased, was mostly looking at infrastructure development over the next period, and housing particularly. Now we will be able to align culture and the creative opportunities, and including also the points in the strategy, visitor economy and tourism as well, with other sectors and other investment opportunities. So, for example, the plan for 5,000, 10,000 new houses and so on, we will be looking then at the role of culture for those individuals, those families, what they are doing in the future, and is that being considered? And that is where working together really will show results. And not only that, but we will then have the building trade and other businesses recognising and then supporting culture in this county as well.
For me, culture should be the golden thread that runs through all policies.
Yes.
Yes. Councillor Phillips.
Yeah, just quickly, two other things. I think it would be wrong for us to not recognise that, particularly with our new museum, you know, we are doing what we can where we can. My worry is that 2 years down the line, we probably couldn't, you know, if we had to do it then, we probably couldn't do it because of financial constraints. So I think, you know, recognise that's part of our partnership role to do that and get our fantastic collection out there and you know, as part of that cultural offer. The other thing is in rural areas. I heard you talk about market towns, and I hear about market towns and all the 5 market towns, but there's a huge rural area there. It's difficult because you don't want to talk to over 100 parish councils. But in my village, which is part of the Black and White Trail, which missed out, of course, on the Golden Valley. When you picked Golden Valley, you should have had the Black and White Village Trail. But, you know, we have things there. We built a new sculpture last year out of the old Verdon oak. You know, again, a small detail, quite big for our village, but again, part of that cultural offer of Herefordshire that just shows that we're innovative and we're doing things. It's a wonderful story. We had a medieval festival last weekend where lots of volunteer groups all came up dressed in medieval clothes and all the rest of it. You know, there's so much going on. Very difficult to capture, I recognise. but don't, because that gives Herefordshire some of its uniqueness as well. So don't forget the rural areas.
You're making me think another partner on the cultural partnership is Diane Mansell and Herefordshire Bid. Yes. And what we're talking about is how we can stop duplicating. So let's feed into the Herefordshire Bid what's on in Herefordshire events calendar that they're building. As opposed to the cultural sector trying to then create their own website that's similar. Your previous question about examples, slightly different, but Plymouth, Plymouth culture, Plymouth has transformed inward investment because the council truly understand the value of culture. And it's what you were saying there about the golden thread. I would say Plymouth is a good example of somewhere that's done it.
But Plymouth is urban and can afford more discretionary services.
You could say that, but it draws on quite a rural hinterland, and there's a lot of poverty there. And another example is Gloucester with Create Gloucester. They are a pioneer of creative health, which the former director of public health here came from Gloucester, and creative health is a new sector that we're moving into, but that's where there can be real change in deeply rural areas. So Meadow Arts is working in the Golden Valley on this creative health programme, and that's where arts and culture can change lives, and it can also help the pressure on the NHS. And we're working with Talk Community, who are another partner outside of the arts and culture sector, on reaching deeply into rural communities through creative health programmes.
Thank you. I should declare I was a founding director of Create Gloucestershire. Yeah, back in the dim, distant past. So, Councillor Harvey, did you have a question?
From another note as well, I think we are, from my own, with wearing my other hat, is that thanks to the Towns Fund and the support again of Herefordshire Council through the Towns Fund, we are just about there finishing a digital media hub in the centre of Hereford. Please do arrange to come in and have a look round. But there is now industry professional facilities, including podcasting studio, and the skills and the professions within the county to actually represent and compete on a national and international scale without having to have recourse to facilities and expertise in Bristol or Cardiff or Birmingham. And I do think that we can step up by working together. We can step up in terms of the comms and the celebration of all the kind of works, large and small, that happen in this county.
Thank you, Nick. Sorry, Councillor Harvey, then Councillor Baker.
Yes, thank you. And that's really helpful to be bringing out all of the different ways in which you're already sort of connecting. And one of the things that, looking at the report, clearly there's an overt recognition of how important getting the youth and young people involved early in cultural activities. It's a portable and lifelong skill once acquired, and that enthusiasm engendered. And looking at your cross-cutting themes in the original strategy, you've got partnership, we've talked about digital, you've got health and well-being, inclusiveness and diversity, and lifelong learning. You've just touched on how important cultural activities are, not just to our young people, but to our older people, for mental health, and also dealing with inclusivity, addressing social isolation and loneliness, getting together with other people and just having some social time. And I'm just wondering whether, seeing as we've now got this refresh, sort of 2025 to 30, at this halfway point, whether one of the recommendations that we might consider, and I've put it across on the chat, is that we ask Herefordshire Council to consider how that updated cultural strategy is connected to our economic development policies and plans, and to health and social care service delivery. You mentioned Talk Community already, which is great, but that's an evolving network, and I think that's really important. And linked to that then, I think because we have an easy access to this network, that we should highlight the cultural strategy again to parish, city and market town councils and encourage their engagement and support of local initiatives. You know, if we're feeding out comms on that axis and asking them bottom up where they're actually supporting and giving grants and other forms of assistance to very local organisations, hopefully that will cross-connect with what you're doing on other axes.
Yeah, I think we will agree that's a good point. We can discuss that when we're talking about our recommendations. Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chair. I've been thinking about your bus analogy. As you said, we are only passengers. We don't put any money into this, do we? But we're writing the timetable rather than the board or the management of the bus company writing the report. So I'm wondering whether you or your board should be writing this report and not us, and then we can sign up to it and use it as our strategy rather than having to go through the whole exercise of writing this thing when possibly we're not as expert as your board.
I think it's already been written by Fifth Sector, who were an external agency that wrote this report for the cultural partnership. I think that there's a conversation to be had within the council. I think you're quite right about the level of involvement and the level that how we embrace this as a council, and how we well, at least become an active passenger as far as direction is concerned, even if we don't start driving and take over at the driving seat, because I think it's being driven very well at the present time. But I do think there's, you know, we should at least be pointing where we want to go on the map a little bit more, I think. Sorry, Damien, yeah?
Yeah, just to say that the strategy has been written by the Cultural Partnership, by independent people, not by the council. But the council is represented on the boards in two places. Myself and Sarah both sit on the board, so we are on the driving seat as well as the council, not just as passengers all the way.
Thank you. Okay, I apologise if it's not meant to be insulting. I think it's not so much about officers really as the fact that I don't feel the council as a whole is engaged. I think it was 2 years I've been a county councillor, and the cultural strategy wasn't discussed. Certainly not at council level with me as a councillor. So how it impacts us, what we're doing with it, how we can be involved, how it should be integrated into every aspect, or potentially could be integrated into more aspects of the council's work, was something I think is a conversation we should be having.
Yeah, no, I understand. I wasn't taking it as a criticism. I'm just pointing out that we're there and understand your point entirely. Thank you.
Okay. Was there any more, Councillor Pepperdy?
I just wanted to highlight the recent Herefordshire Histories Festival as an example built on the kind of HR model of celebrating all those kind of, including in the rural areas as well, and all these kind of small makers and all these small businesses. And what made it so successful was the digital platform that kind of supported it and made it easy to find out where all these things were. And I think that model is excellent, and I can see it's incorporated into the cultural strategy about recognising and celebrating all the makers that are out there, all the creatives who are already doing that thing, and then supporting them by bringing them together on a platform where we can support people to actually attend the events. Because the one thing that was clear in the cultural strategy or in the report was that it's the visitor economy, it's getting people to go there. And of course, that links in so clearly with council policy, including economy, but also transport as well. And so I really feel very strongly that not only do the council need to be represented on the cultural partnership, which they clearly are very well through Damien and Sarah, but also we need to do more of bringing your body into our conversations, as Nick has been through the Economy in Place board.
Thank you. And yes, and I'm really happy to look at how, you know, how that might work and what would be work for everybody, a little bit more focused. And I think that would address Ed's sort of points there about more people internally in the council and from different departments and with different responsibilities being a little bit more aware and understanding of where and how they can benefit from it and how their own services can benefit. Thank you.
Sorry, I was just writing something on the Teams. Yes, Councillor Harvey.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to pick up and congratulate you on the digital hub, and that being a really important resource for people who are wanting to get into the digital arts, whilst not necessarily having the funds to create everything that they need, all the tools they need to do that themselves. And I think the Make, which is just round the corner here for the blacksmith, the artist blacksmithing community, is another example of a resource that creators can access, which has the kind of equipment that they can't necessarily afford for themselves. And I think maybe there's something that we need to have more of a conversation on about these stepping stone hub type facilities that help our creatives. As you said, lots of people end up working on their own or with one other person in a converted farm building on, you know, or in their upstairs room, and getting over that hump from leaving college, leaving university, and that getting access to that equipment that you can't afford to buy for yourself in a sort of a maker hub environment, that there may be a couple of other sorts of hub environments that would really help our creative community to burgeon and grow lots of little micro businesses, which is what Herefordshire's renowned for.
Historically, even you know, going back you know, into the last century and earlier, you know, there was you know, expansion of publishers in Herefordshire and so on, and that was because, again, they became known for a period of time of writers, authors, publishers to be living in counties like Herefordshire and so on. And so I think you're right. I think that capital assets that can be located. I have some very good research that's being done both here and internationally on rural areas and cultural assets in dispersed cultural assets. Exactly as you say, co-working spaces, equipment, all those capital items that people will need. And not only that, but they will benefit rubbing shoulders and working with other people in what is otherwise can be quite an isolated, lonely conditions. So yes, I think that's a very good point. Thank you.
Okay, any more questions? Yes, Councillor Purdy.
Only when looking at the cultural strategy and just thinking about perhaps what might be opportunities, I just thought about two things. One is that there's not much representation from the tech college, who have got quite an extensive programme of creative short courses, and whether they should kind of be pulled in somehow a little bit. And the other thing is this, the fact that we have this status of an area of archaeological importance, which the report said there wasn't enough made of that. And I think that ties in so much to a lot of the rural communities as well, and our built heritage, and the whole kind of Histories Festival that was kind of drawing that together highlighted so many other kind of cultural aspects that I hadn't considered before, and whether, you know, there might be some perhaps more consideration or focus had looked at that as well.
One of the things we're thinking going forward is that we take the priorities set out in the cultural strategy and we keep them consistently as our headings on agendas. So, for example, cultural heritage would be an agenda item in all future meetings, creative health, creative education, so then it wouldn't just be the art college, but it could be the tech college or representatives from schools, so that we keep those kind of headlines in mind, because obviously we're covering a lot of agendas. there's a lot of juicy stuff under the heading of culture, and obviously the visitor economy is part of that as well.
And I was also pleased with the Economy in Place Board that the principal of the College, David Williams, of Hereford and Ludlow College, is on there as well. And I happen to know from David that we are pushing at an open door for curriculum development support, including within their business department as well. So yes, absolutely, because again, we are thinking about investment of skills, the next generation, and their own families and welfare. And I think that, again, there is real opportunities now within the within the culture and creative industries to open those doors a little wider in our formal training and apprenticeship schemes as well. Just on apprenticeships as well, I think we do need a different model. The Cultural Partnership is in conversation with some of the skills providers there. I know from even my own organisation, which is relatively large compared to a sole trader, but to take on one full-time apprentice is quite challenging. They might have a really good week, but they might also, in danger of making the tea for another week. There is, but they're potentially looking at how rural areas structure apprenticeships, possibly into clusters of businesses that can, young people can move around and so on. There's a lot of new thinking within that sector. And again, that sector features within the cultural strategy and within the cultural partnership. So, but work to do there, no doubt.
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Pepper.
Just to add on to that, I know that the tech do bespoke training packages for businesses.
Yes.
So I just wonder if the creative industries might have an idea about a specific kind of training or development course that people might undertake as a kind of stepping stone to becoming part of the creative industries.
Absolutely. And of course, going with those harder skills, maybe in terms of photography or in terms of visual art, but also are what we used to call soft skills, are those business skills and how you find business, sustain business, all of that. All needs to be wrapped in, and it is the absence of some of that knowledge and skills that keeps some sole traders from saying, no, I just do my day. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm feeling we're reaching a time where we can make our recommendations. I'd like to thank you all. What we will do is we'll take a brief break while we discuss the recommendations from this section of the meeting. So could we stop the live feed, please? And we'll
The live stream has been restarted.
Okay, in a slight change to the agenda, we'll be making the recommendations at the end of the overall session. So we'll be moving the recommendations until after the end of the LTP for the in and around the cultural strategy. We're now going to move on to the local transport plan. And I understand we've got officers present, and we'll be getting an introduction from Fionn Horton. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here to talk to you. So I recently joined Herefordshire Council in February, and the first strategy priority for me was to get the local transport plan out to public consultation, which we've done. So thank you for some time here to talk to you about what we've been doing. So last year we did a lot of public engagement before I joined with the public to see what they wanted us to focus on in the local transport plan, because it is a really important document. It opens up funding opportunities for us, and it sets that strategy for our transport network for a generation or two. So this will run for the next 16 years. One thing we have done is split the strategies into two. So it's one local transport plan, but half of it is focused on the city and the other half is focused on the rural market towns. We've done that because they are very unique in their transport networks. So 55% of houses in the city have a car, but 90% of houses in the rural area have a car, so only 10% don't. So focusing on the same mode of transport in both areas is going to have really poor results. So we've split them into two. And then in addition to that, we've got 3 action plans. We focused on the transport network as a whole, the city, and then the rural market towns. So we can put appropriate measures into the appropriate areas. We've done internal consultation with staff before we went to the public, so that was particularly with our transport planning, with our planning services, our business development services, education, etc., to make sure that what we thought we needed to give to the public was what internally we needed to do. There were some changes done there, and then we've gone to the public with our draft local plan. Originally, the consultation was due to end at the end of this week. However, we've extended it for our town and borough and our local councils because they wanted extra time, so we felt that was fine. So if you're a local council and you want to respond, you've got until the end of this month. We did halfway through the first month, we had a review of the responses we received so that we could make any amendments to the way we were consulting if we felt there were gaps. So I do have some slides to show you in a moment where we'll talk through some of the information we've got. One thing we did notice that we were struggling with engaging from the younger community. So since then, I've gone to the college, we've engaged with the youth council, and there's been some bespoke comms gone out to all the schools through our education colleagues. They've done some really helpful work for us there. So in addition to that, we have had some changes to the LTP we've done already. So the first one is the Pontrillus railway station, and that was an omission on the original document. It was brought up by the community group. Valid point, and that has been amended in the local transport plan. So the one that goes to Cabinet will have a bespoke section on those, not just that one area, but lots of options of them, because rail is so important. So if we just go through the slides quickly, I've not done extensive slides. I didn't want to kill everyone by PowerPoint. But I am open to questions. So as you can see here, I've compared the responses to the demographic of Herefordshire. So if you can see, 25% of people in Herefordshire are over 65, but 43% of those responding to consultation are over 65. So we've really struggled to engage and capture the imagination of the younger generation, and that's something we really need to work on, particularly going forward in any of our transport policies to work with them. There has been some additional kind of links with the college where I'm going to go in September and be more of a regular attendee with the college council of students to talk them through what we're doing. So hopefully we can work on that. The next slide.
Surely we've got more than 0.0% of the population under 18.
I don't know why it'd come up as 0, but it is meant to be more than that. I think
That would be a major cause of concern.
I think it's based on census, and obviously young people, they haven't responded to the census in that way. So yeah, there's an omission there, but we could work on that. So next slide, we look at the big question we asked is, do people feel they have good options for transport? And resoundingly, really, it's no. Our residents don't feel we give them good transport options, and that's something we really, really need to work on, which is a big focus of the LTP to enhance those options we've got available. But again, it's just that certainty from the public that that is something as officers and as a council we need to focus on. The action plans, this is the next one, they are the list of projects that we have identified for the city, the transport network and the rural market towns. So overall, people are either very neutral to them or supportive of them, but the actual opposition is quite low, which is great for officers because I think it means we've picked the right projects. They may not be perfect, but overall they're the right projects and we can work on a position of it's good, let's get it great. So that's where we are with those. I think that's really positive for us. The priorities which align with the corporate priorities, again, some are more supported than others. What I haven't done is a slide on people's opinion on things like climate change, EV charging, parking. I didn't want to skew any public responses because if I put the figures up, you'd know what people were saying and we could get responses to skew it. But the main trend is that people don't support things like active travel, EV charging, sustainable ways of transport. They are very poorly supported, whereas more car-dominant ones are very supported. So that's a change to what the government trends are telling us we should be focusing on. So it's really important that we get the balance right within our local transport plan because the public aren't wanting what the government are telling us to do. So we need to find a balance somewhere on that. And then the last one is just a lovely word map, a cloud map of all the kind of the comments people have put in. And I think it really does show when you look at some of the comments, you've got things like bypass, trains, public transport, buses, those are people's focus. So it relates back to that question of people don't feel they've got good transport options, and that's reflective in the comments they put forward as well. So in a month or so time, we'll have a much more detailed list of feedback of what the consultation has said, but this was based on the first couple of weeks of consultation, so I'm happy to speak.
Thanks, Fionn. Roughly, did you say how many responses you've had to date?
We've had about 110 last time we checked, so relatively low.
It is a bit low. Yeah.
We've done continued engagement. It's relatively low within staff as well. So you might have noticed that the Chief Exec has put something out in his newsletter reminding people because transport issues was a high priority the staff put in their staff survey, yet the engagement from staff has been quite low. I'm hoping that it will ramp up. We did go and do the college session and we had probably about 100 students come and talk to us, but those figures haven't been included in that list yet.
But you said there were quite a few surprising responses in terms of people who were against EV chargers, that were against cutting down, against cycleways.
Against cycleways, active travel, against things like the barrel bikes.
Could that have been because it was shared within a certain group or of people who were aligned in a certain way through social media?
Yeah, I think it might be. I think the college students, when obviously I was speaking to them, their outlook is very different. It's almost polarised into what the actual feedback we had at that point was. So hopefully if we get more responses from your under 25s, that might become a bit more balanced, because it is quite black and white at the minute of yes to cars, no to active travel, and I don't necessarily think that is reflective of the opinions I've had from people as I've been talking to them. It's just sometimes the loudest voices respond and they sometimes aren't always reflective of the majority of people.
One of the recommendations here was that the committee scrutinise the initial findings from the consultation and how these findings will be incorporated into the final plan. So I find myself in a position where I have to ask the question, if the trend continues the way it is currently going, will that have an impact upon on the LTP? Because a lot of what you're saying there, if a lot of people are against the sort of the EV charging points, etc., are we talking about cutting back, or?
It would have to be a review of that. I think there's going to be a mixture of, are we as a council doing the right engagement with people to explain the benefits of those strategies? And are we maybe focusing too much on certain benefits over others? Is there things we can do to work with the community to adapt those strategies more to what they need? A lot of these strategies are government priorities. So in some unfortunate way, we have to deliver EV charging, we have to deliver active travel. That's the strategy the government is giving us. So it's not that we can't deliver them, it just means we probably have to change the way we deliver them as officers. And if that is better community engagement, that's maybe something we need to reflect on in how we currently work.
I would say it's disappointing that there's only been 110 responses so far. So I will certainly continue to try and push people within and Ross through my sort of channels to take part, and I hope all councillors would do the same. I think it's vital we do get people taking part in this as much as possible. Yeah, Councillor Pepperton and Councillor Harvey.
Well, and just that I hope that the response of 100 people doesn't influence our policy making, really, because it's not enough to do that.
100% you're correct there. What the local transport plan does is it aligns to the council priorities. So there's an element of the council has declared a climate emergency. The LTP needs to support ways to reduce that. So the public opinion is really important, but there's limited what we can change within the LTP. And actually, when we did ask people's opinion on the strategies, they all agreed. They were, yeah, they're great, we support them. And when we put the action plan out, which deliver responses to those strategies, those were almost universally supported or neutral. So it's a bit strange that people love our ideas of how to resolve the problem, but just don't think the issue is a problem. It's odd how the responses have come in, but we work with them. But yeah, you're totally right. The council has a strategy and has a policy, and we have to work with that. So it's limited what we can change.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey?
Yes, thank you. Can I take a step back for a moment and just ask a couple of, context questions? We've got a local transport plan that goes out to 2031 at the moment, and that's associated with a local transport strategy that is covering the same time frame. We're being asked here to take a look at a local transport plan which goes from now until 2041, and there isn't an associated local transport strategy for that. So I'm wondering, is this local transport plan supposed to be seen in the context of the existing local transport strategy, or are we being asked to look at a local transport plan without an accompanying strategy?
So the LTP is linked to the housing allocation that was given previously. So that was 16,000 houses. Since the LTP was being written, government have increased those numbers significantly. So rather than delay the LTP, because things have changed in the industry since the current one was in, what we have done is we've said that we're going to do an amendment to the local transport plan when the local plan is adopted. So this one now works with the the old allocation, but we will have an amendment to it. So part of that is there'll be monthly meetings between the local transport, the transport policy team and the planning team, where we look at where the housing allocation is going, how it's going to work with the current infrastructure we've got. We've got the transport model running, and as part of that will be a working document that officers work on over the next couple of years, highlighting projects that we need and changes we need to the local transport plan. So around the same time, I think it's about 2028, there will be an amendment to the local transport plan coming in as well.
I'm
Okay,
curious.
well, can I follow up on that then? Because that's a little bit confusing. You've got the time frame stated for this plan as going out to 2041, but you're saying that it aligns with the time frame of the existing strategy, which is out to 2031. Other local authorities, and you've said that any updated local transport plan will need to align with the updated local plan, which is going to reflect a judgment about how the council positions the 27,000 additional homes that the government's targeting us with. What I'm not understanding is why you've got this extended time frame, which effectively, which appears to to be saying this plan aligns with the as yet unpublished local plan, our planners are saying, despite us having got to Regulation 18 on the draft of that updated local plan, we're effectively having to bin that and go round the buoy on the whole process because of the huge number of additional homes that the county's been targeted with. Why are we not aligning the development of a local plan, a local transport plan, with the development of the update of the local plan, so that as we revisit the options for where significant tranches of houses might be located physically within the footprint of the county, we are also then considering what the implications are in terms of the road network and other things. I just don't understand why we are updating the local transport plan now in the absence of understanding where all these houses are going to go.
I think that's a clear question, Fionn. Could you come back on that, thanks?
Yeah, we don't. So not all councils have their local transport plan and their local plan aligned for the same time periods. Herefordshire does, and that's great. We've done such a significant amount of work on the local transport plan and what we've done now. The decision could have been that we finish all that work, we scrap it, and we wait until the local plan has been done, which would incur significant costs on the council because the data that we've got for the local transport plan is time limited. So it wouldn't just be able to be carried over for a couple more years. We'd have to continue to spend significant amount of public money on a document that could be quite easily amended. For me, local plans get put in and they stay rigid. I don't think that's the best thing for Herefordshire. I think what we need to do is get into the habit of, we have the framework, we have the strategy, but as big council documents come forward that might change fundamentally how we consider something, we should be in a position to amend that local plan, that local transport plan, which is what we're doing here. So the local transport plan fits with everything the council want to do now, with the current strategies that are in place. Something will change when the local plan is adopted with the 27,000 houses. The local transport plan should be amended at that point. But likewise, if the council suddenly said, we're going to build an airport, the local transport plan should at that point be reviewed and amended for that. That's the kind of the strategy and the position we're going with the local plan at the moment. So it can be updated as and when needed, rather than just be a document that sits on the shelf for 20, 30 years and doesn't get reviewed regularly.
You're saying this is the most cost-efficient way of doing it?
I believe it is the most cost-efficient way, and it's also the most reactive way to either what the current administration wants, the council wants, and national government are asking us to do. If we only did it once in a generation, it is going to be a very outdated document very quickly, and I don't think that's what the public want, because part of the criticism we get as local authority officers is you don't react to anything, you just let things bypass, and that's not what we're doing here. So while I get it's different, I think it is the right thing to do.
Can I continue with my line of inquiry on this for a brief moment? Because surely then we should have the time frame out to 2031 against this as a plan, and be extending it out to 2041 when it's actually reflecting where the communities live are, who are actually going to be being expected to take all of these thousands of additional houses. And for me, updating the transport plan, putting the longer time frame on it, and yet not disclosing where all of those additional houses are going to sit within our community is confusing at best, and sort of will not be interpreted well at worst when those communities find out where all these houses are going to get dumped.
Can I just ask a question here? Can Councillor Price assure us that this wasn't a political decision?
It's all political.
Well, I suppose you could say everything is political, as you're saying.
Well, no, we
We've
were
got-
told
so-
it was a
so-
cost-saving
So there's nothing
decision. so-
political about the fact that we're going to have a local transport. We have to have one, and we have to see that it's updated to achieve the methodology of everything that is put to us. When I heard on the first week that we were had this mandatory increase of housing by the degree that it is, my first view was we will never be able to deliver that amount of housing without the right infrastructure to support it. Now, if you want infrastructure, you have to have funding to go with it. And the first question was, where's the funding come from to provide the infrastructure that's necessary to deal with the housing? Now, it's all very well to say 27,000 as a minimum extra number of houses wherever they're going to go. So that's why the local plan got scrapped, has been rebuilt. But fundamentally behind it, we've had to rebuild the local transport plan, which may or may not have to be adjusted as the local plan is fully comes online. But you can't just say, we're scrapping this and we've got to rebuild it, so we scrap that and we scrap that. We have to have a local transport plan in place, and we are delivering on the local transport plan, and we need to ensure that we're in the right place at the right time going forward.
But
It's not a matter of whether
okay,
it's
but
2031
Councillor
or
Harvey's
20.
point that if we're currently creating the LTP based upon the current housing allocation, then why are we taking to 2041 and not to 2031 so it aligns with the current plan?
I think there are fundamental strategies that will remain regardless of the housing allocation, such as safety, reduced carbon, inclusivity. So the difference will be the action plans where we put the projects we need to build on the highway infrastructure to align to the future needs of the county. Those are where the changes come in. We could have scrapped the whole plan and said, right, when the local plan, whenever that is, because housing allocation could change. Again, we will wait until we have certainty and then do the local transport plan with the local plan. They are unique documents in their own right. They exist together, but they exist individually. So this is why it's so important to have that local transport plan. It would have wasted a lot of public money to scrap the work we'd already done on the local transport
Thank
plan.
you. I think we're going around in circles now. I'd like to move on to the actual substance of the plan. I think we can maybe come back later, Councillor. I'm conscious we have Councillor Price for another 15 minutes, and there might be other questions that we might want to raise while he's with us. Councillor Phillips, please.
Yeah, and I'm clearly the amount of consultation replies we've had is just not good enough. I didn't bother to work out what percentage of the population it was. However, there's something in me that says, my gut feeling says I'm not surprised. Herefordshire people have got an issue about transport. It is a big topic for them. And when they're offered an opportunity like this, no, they don't see it, because you don't do anything anyway. Where are you going to have a bypass? You're not going to have a bypass. Is it going left? Is it going right? Which means that the A49, A645 spur is absolutely crucial to ignite people to realise that you can actually do things. I take your point about the flexibility and fluidity that you need with regard to the huge imposition of extra houses. Where those houses goes has a huge impact on us. And the reality is, whatever our public might say, the government of the day dictates where the money goes. And if the government says it wants active transport and it wants charging, that's the only way you're going to get money. So and that of course adds to the cynicism of the public we represent. But having said that, it is that blend. So I see the struggle. The other thing is, of course, this is a concentration on the city and the market towns, but at the end of the day, 50% of the population, by our own figures, live in rural areas. 90% of those households, and I'm surprised it's only 90%, have access to a vehicle. You may not like it, but car isn't king. It's just an essential act of life that you have to have it. There was that ridiculous business that if you've got 3 cars, you're wealthy. No, you're not. You've got 3 members of the family that are working and need to get to bloody work. So that's the issue. And I think we need to obviously understand and build that in, because these are the people that drive into market towns. They like to use buses, but then how much can you subsidise a bus for? Again, it's about discretionary part of your budget. So they drive into market towns. Where are they going to park? How are they going to get there? Absolutely essential, cross-cutting to the economic welfare of those market towns. So see the linkage is absolutely important in that. Thanks.
Definitely, and I think that's why we made the decision to split the plan into 2 strategies with multiple action plans, because what is needed in Ross and Y is not going to be needed what is in Kington or in Hereford. So that's why we've made it so unique. And we really want the public to give us their comments on it, because they know their areas better than officers do, and they are the right people to give us the guidance on what we're saying. You know, we're asking for half-hourly bus services. If it's in the LTP, it can go as part of our funding bid for the next BSIP funding allocation. If we don't have in the LTP, it's not likely to be funded. So it is important that we get the right balance between the areas. So yeah, I totally agree. You can't live in a rural area without a car.
Great, thank you. I'd like just to bring in Rhiannon now from Active Travel England, if we could. Rhiannon, are you there?
Hello, yes, I'm here.
I'd be very interested to hear your views on our LTP, please. I think that will help us steer this conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, it's yeah, thank you very much. It's very interesting to hear your perspective about you know, the kind of direction that the government is is kind of influencing this, and how that might contrast with some of the perspectives you've had from your locals. So from our perspective, great to see that you've got active travel embedded across the objectives. So, you know, promoting access to skills in the economy, and there are active travel elements throughout the plan. I think we just like to see a bit more detail. Obviously appreciate that it's a plan, but it can really help to ensure that schemes are well used. If you've got plans about how you intend to achieve your active travel objectives. So yeah, that's mostly it from myself.
Thank you. I mean, while you're picking up on that, I mean, while you're on active travel, I think one of the things I noticed is there weren't any targets for the modal shift. I wondered whether we were going to look at targets, and also I noticed that we didn't have any LTN 1/20 design commitments. Do you want to pick up on that? Maybe explain what I'm talking about for those that don't follow.
Yeah, so there is a guidance document called LTN 120, which Active Travel England have developed, and it gives the local authority guidance on how walking and cycling routes should be designed. So it's based around safety and number of cars, number of active travel users. That is a guidance document. It's not mandatory, but linked to that are road safety audits, which we legally have to do. The following up from the local transport plan will be what we call the LCWIP, the local walking, cycling infrastructure plan, and that will be consulted on later on this year, or this summer, and then hopefully be adopted this year. That gives much more detail on what the routes we want to develop are, and they are county-wide. It's a huge document, and we're currently just working on a map-based representation, because otherwise you're going to have about 40 pages of lines of schemes. It's in that document where we go into much more detail of what we want to deliver, and within that document there are recommendations on monitoring, so LTN compliance, number of modal shift, which is where we...
So this is in the LC whip, is it?
This will be more detailed within the LC whip.
So the LC whip will have, you're saying that we will be going for the LTN
where
120?
Possible, we always strive to achieve an LTN 120 compliance scheme. In a rural authority, it is not always possible to have that level of compliance. However, Active Travel England have put out a rural guidance document for councils to review at the moment, which is, we're doing that at the moment from Herefordshire, so they'll get a formal response from us. So where possible, we will always try to be LTN 120. I can't guarantee we will always be it, because sometimes it would be a case of either we are fully compliant and therefore we don't deliver anything, or we can be slightly deviated from the standard, and we still have an infrastructure piece put in. But one thing we do have the benefit of Active Travel England is that our designs can be reviewed by Active Travel England, and they'll review them. And particularly where we do deviate from LTM 120, we will do a deviation register and explain why. So it might be a case of we can't have a segregation between walking and cycling. We need to combine them because we would have to knock down a listed building, or we would have to, make the road, we'd have to close the road entirely. So in those instances, we would always explain why we can't achieve the highest standard possible.
Can I just check, Rhiannon, are you comfortable with this position?
Yes, so as Fionn mentioned, we've currently got a draft version of our rural guidance, which Herefordshire are commenting on at the moment. But yes, acknowledge that it can be a bit challenging to implement LTM 120 routes, particularly in rural areas. But I would say that although it's guidance, it's a good quality level to aim for, because it can, LTM 120 routes can be associated with higher levels of uplift. So, while we recognise that you have to be pragmatic sometimes and that there are constraints, that means you can't deliver it throughout. It's a good standard to work towards in order to meet your uplift targets as well.
Would you like to see targets in modal shift?
It can be helpful for yourselves to have that monitoring evaluation, so you can see what your baseline is, and you can monitor and track how effective your schemes are. It's also worthwhile mentioning that we have our ATE toolkits as well, so that builds on LTM 120 perspectives, and also incorporates walking metrics, because LTM 120 is cycling with structure. We're not just about cycling, we also care about walking and wheeling as well, and our toolkits allow for that quality to be assessed.
Thank you. Bruce, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you. I'm concerned about the matter of greenways, which are mentioned on page 26 of the draft report. If I go back to I think it must be the current plan, which is from 2021 to 2041.
Can you pull your mic down a little bit closer to you, Bruce? We're losing you.
It mentions, I'll read it out, it says, explore opportunities to reinforce the disused railway line connecting Bromyard to Worcester and Bromyard to Leominster as a continuous wildlife corridor. Then it says in brackets, subject to landowner and property owners agreement. And they're looking for long-term aspirations should be to provide an active travel link along its entire length. Now the current draft plan, and let me just find it. If you look on page 26, there's a list of the 4 market towns, and it says under Bromyard, it says Bromyard is a smaller market town where improving crossing facilities, cycle parking and space for pedestrians will have the greatest benefit. Then it says we will also support improved routes, and there's a typo here. I think it must mean to run alongside the disused railway line into Bromyard. Now this is the draft at the moment. There is absolutely no mention there at all of people who own land and property along this disused railway line. In fact, the bit that runs across the top of the county from Bromyard towards Leominster is totally owned by private people, and they are concerned that this report has come back up yet again in this particular draft, making no mention of them at all, which is very worrying. And one of these, in fact, it's the old station at Rowden Mill, which is just on the edge of the top edge of Bromyard, and there's a family there who bought the old railway station. They spent a huge amount of money restoring it. It's now Airbnbs and what have you in the old buildings, and in some railway carriages they brought in. There's a small stretch of railway line which is still there, and these people turned up a couple of years back to their property, these Greenway people, and said, oh, well, this is very nice, and we could make a tea room here, and we can have toilets there, and this is their house. And they said, well, this isn't right. And it's still popping up. And I want you to look at this bit about when it says the Bromyard, and then rewrite it and make sure you've covered the fact that it relies upon landowners and property owners volunteering to vacate their property and sell
I'm going
up.
to stop you. I get slightly concerned when we're getting involved with people who could possibly be identified via the conversation we're having. I think the officers possibly get what you're saying there.
I hope so.
Councillor Baker. I do, and I'm sure that will be taken on board.
Yeah, that's fine. I think it's just an omission, but we will add a line into the document that goes to Cabinet stating subject to landowner discussions and
Could you
agreements.
circulate
That's fine, that's
new
not a problem.
paragraph?
Yeah.
It wants to be a bit bigger than just 3 lines. And so I can then tell people in my ward that they haven't got anything to worry about
I think that's
at the moment.
sufficient. Yeah, I think we've got it.
It's important. And I
Yeah.
did say
It's
to
got.
them,
It's been.
I did say to these people that I would bring it up today, and I think Philip has got a similar setup down the Golden Valley.
Yeah, yes, and actually, it's something that needs.
I'm just going to hand over to the monitoring officer for a second.
Sorry, well, statutory scrutiny officer.
Does that come with a pay rise as well? Yes.
Yes, thank you. Just to note, really, this is our role here is strategic, and the local transport plan is strategic. The point's been noted. I think a lengthy discussion around particular landowners is inappropriate. The point's been made. The officers committed. I think that's the extent of the discussion that's appropriate for this meeting.
Well,
Okay, do you have another question,
At least I
Councillor?
said it, even if I'm not allowed to.
Well, it's been said and noted, so thank you, Councillor Baker. Councillor Harvey.
Yes, thank you. I mean, I'd refer everybody to the saving of in strategic terms of the entire route of the Gloucestershire and Herefordshire Canal, which has by both authorities been saved in planning terms across both counties in order to facilitate the kind of landowner discussions that would need to go ahead were the canal to be reinstated, which would be a fantastic tourism and economic boost to both counties, and indeed even just reinstating the towpath throughout its length in Herefordshire would provide an off-road walking and cycling route that would be hugely beneficial. But it is saved in strategic planning terms, and that's the point of being a local planning authority, that you make those kind of decisions. The detail in terms of how those are implemented comes further down the line, but it's a strategic stake in the ground. This is not the wisdom of the crowd. This is a case of saying, at a top level, we see this as a really important thing to happen for everybody. There may be individuals that will need to have conversations about, how that happens in a way that's acceptable to everybody, or to them specifically, but it's setting a marker down. And I think, the local transport plan similarly is setting some fairly major markers down, isn't it? Sorry, Chair, I'm going to go back to some higher level things before making some specific points about the policies within the document that we've got here. The plan that we've got in place at the moment has got 43 policies in it, which look like, they're quite tightly worded, they're really specific, and it looks like they've got quite an important and strong correlation to the oversight and management of the public realm contract and the way in which that strategic contract partner works with us in delivering our strategic infrastructure initiatives and maintaining our road network. Now, the document before us, which we're being told is going to replace it, has 6 pretty thin, high level and loosely worded supposed policies and I'm just wondering how we move from 43 detailed policies to replace them with 6 pretty loose high-level statements. I can't see them as policies, and they are full of wording which is very open to interpretation in terms of which strategic developments might be ruled in or out in terms of their application, etc., etc. And I just worry that we're going from something that's very specific, quite tight, really directed, to something that is really floppy, a bit hand-wavy, and it bears no comparison to what it is ostensibly replacing. And I'd really like a bit of an explanation from officers as to how that's going to work.
Yeah, so the LTP can't be used as a contract management mechanism. The LTP is not a document to control Balfour Beatty or whoever takes on the public realm. It
just sets some policy.
Just let's let her answer, and we can come back.
I didn't say that it did, so.
Okay, so it's there to guide what we want for the network. I don't think it's floppy. I think it is quite a dynamic document. While I understand the previous one was quite rigid in what it required, that is another way of describing that is it stifles innovation, and it requires very little deviation. It allows very little deviation from what is 40 plus strategies. This document aligns to the council's priorities. Those have been set by full cabinet. They are what the council have told us is a priority, and that's what the LTP is focusing on. If there are specific objectives and strategies in the previous document you would like to be seen within the new LTP, this is what the consultation period is for. We can review them and we might be able to add some more in. So while the two documents are very different, I think they both want to achieve the same thing, just in different ways. So if there are examples, like I said, if you would like to send them over to me, I can speak with the team about it and we can review whether they should be added in or not.
I mean, just looking at it, for me, it felt more like a presentation difference rather than any substantial change or being something other than a strategic document. It's all in there. I mean, you go through the strategy for rural towns in Herefordshire. There's, 23, 24 different points that you could go through there, in terms of all of which could be argued are policy decisions.
I'm talking about specifically articulated policies, and we're moving from 43 to 6. And I'll give you an example of what I consider to be worryingly loose language. You're saying as far as design standards are concerned, that's policy TN5, to support the provision of streets that encourage cycling, walking and wheeling, all improvement schemes of significant value will need to demonstrate that they have considered the Healthy Streets principles and appropriate active travel design standards. Well, who's going to be the arbiter of significant value? And where the statement says will need to demonstrate that they have only considered the Healthy Streets principles, do we not need to be a little bit tighter than that? Because I'm not a developer or a landowner, but I'm pretty confident I could canter a coach and horses through that if I wanted to.
So the LTP is one document that the developers have to work within. There are significant other documents they need to do, like the local plan. In addition to that, Active Travel England are a statutory consultee, so they will give guidance and objections to planning applications if they feel they don't meet their objectives. We can be more rigid, but that may have the negative effect where it doesn't allow any development, or it doesn't allow us to make local decisions based on local needs. So like we were talking about the LTM 120 difficulty we have in rural areas, it may be the case of we would like to put an active travel corridor in Kington, but we can't because the LTP has now said it must meet A, B and C criteria, therefore you're not getting anything. This is what the document is trying to limit, those negative outcomes of over-bureaucratic documents that do control in a way that isn't helpful. So while we can be more rigid, there are negative impacts if that is the case.
Okay, well, let me cite another one then. TN4, travel planning in strategic allocations. Developments within the largest local plan allocations that would generate significant movement will need to contribute towards a site travel plan that identifies measures to secure new sustainable travel arrangements. Well, without, I mean, where are you going to draw the line in terms of the largest local plan allocations? I mean, for villages, I mean, Withington, I'd use as an example, has had quite significant housing growth. It was only a little village, but the impact of those developments and the need to assist their residents to move around safely and connect with bus stops and other sort of travel means is not diminished. It's significant in the context of that community, and yet you're only talking about the largest local plan allocations. Well, those housing developments were never even an allocation, so they would fall entirely outside of that as a plan.
David,
that's another example.
I was just wondering, Chair, do you want to make this as a recommendation that we go through and we compare what's the old plan to what's we're talking about here, to make sure the new one does adequately cover this, and we can come back? I don't know if is that a recommendation.
I think it's certainly something we can
consider.
consider. No. So you're suggesting one of the recommendations is that we compare the 7, I believe, aren't there?
Just
the 7
so there's
policies.
a sense that the new one does adequately kind of articulate what the old one
to ensure
is.
that
there's
nothing's fallen
parity
between the cracks, so to speak.
Yeah, I just wondered if that's a recommendation you
Something
make, and then
I think it's something we can
go away and
consider
do that.
as a committee at the end.
It's only an suggestion.
I'm happy that we consider that, and thank you for that as a suggestion. But I think, it's not going from 43 down to 6. It's a very different approach that's been taken to the policies here, as we've heard from officers. What I want is to be assured that the language that's being used in these flexible, floppy policies that are being stated here are clear, at least, and actually mean something when you poke at them, that they are not, they don't just completely fall apart or turn into a cloud of fog when, you try and apply them.
Thank you, Councillor. I think you've made that point a couple of times, and I think we get that now, and I think that's a good suggestion from David. We can move on that. Sorry, Frank, you've got a question?
So, can I ask then, this is the draft LTP for public consultation. When does this move to the next stage? And when it's moved to the next stage, will we have dates for all the things that are proposed? Because my concern is, at the back of it, when we got the action plans for the transport network and for rural heritage and all the different things, they're nice words. I don't disagree with that. But who's going to make sure that these things happen, and when will they happen?
Yeah, so the next stage, post-consultations, we will review the consultation. If we feel that the LTP is suitable or with minor amendments is suitable, we're scheduled to go to Cabinet in September for approval, and then full council in October for adoption. So that's the current plan. Once it's been adopted, as part of that, then officers will come back with delivery plans and priorities of those projects. A lot of them will be limited to funding that's made available to us. So it might be that we say this is the 5 projects we're going to go for these funding opportunities in these various grants, but without significant investment from Herefordshire Council itself, a lot of the dates will be fluid depending on external funding, unfortunately.
Wouldn't it be advisable for the dates to be in place before it's adopted?
Yeah, we could do that.
I just think having an understanding of the plan of how it will be implemented before it's adopted would be useful rather than it being retrospective.
Can't do that because this is being produced out of sync with the local plan, which is going to be stating where the actual housing developments are going to be targeted, and this is the cart before the horse. And if we accept the premise that it's appropriate to have the cart put before the horse, then an implementation plan doesn't make sense until the horse appears.
I take that on board. I don't think it's going to affect everything within the LTP, and I think there will be some areas where timelines can be explained and explored before adoption. But I think, yes, it's a good point. We need to have at the back of our mind the fact that there will be a review of this in the not too distant future, and that will obviously have an impact upon timelines. So thank you for that intervention. I've got a couple of questions around specifics that I wouldn't mind getting into. A bit more about the 30-minute place. I don't think it's particularly well. I don't really. Could you explain the 30-minute places as it appears in the document and how they're going to be? What are the initiatives around those and how they're going to be prioritised?
Yeah, so one of the priorities government are putting forward is having infrastructure within a certain time frame for people to get to, whether it be a doctor's, a shops, a school. And that really does link in with our growth strategy for the council and our transport network and how we achieve those. So it's about making sure that as we develop the transport network, we keep in mind that local communities need to access facilities and making sure that they are easily accessible, in whether it be by bus or by car, in a prescribed time period. Some of the cities are going for like 15-minute cities. That won't work in a rural area. This is why we've slightly amended it for our local plan.
So can you explain what that would mean in practice for one of our market towns, say, for instance?
Okay, so we would work with our, say housing allocation went to Ross-on-Wye. We would then work with our education colleagues to make sure that there was a school within a certain distance of those news properties, so that we could encourage active travel, walking, cycling. There's certain guidance we get from places like Active Travel England where they say a child under 10 shouldn't be expected to walk any more than a mile, and anything more than that we then have to provide public transport for them. So we would then work with planning to say, okay, well, these new houses here, there's no doctors within half hour, there's no how are we going to do that? And then we would work with the CGC about getting some kind of medical facility available to them, making sure that housing developments, whether they be large or small, are not just housing. There's actually infrastructure within them so that the community can live, and also it then doesn't put undue pressure on existing infrastructure. So, if you double the amount of housing in a development in one of our market towns, the doctor's surgery or the school or the library may not be able to cope, and we need to find ways within our existing options, whether that be a Section 106 contribution, a 278, however funding we get, to work with developers so they can build that infrastructure, so it doesn't then fall back on the council 10 years down the line, a massive bill to try and fix a problem that's been created by overdevelopment.
So a 30-minute place, you're saying a specific initiative might be if there's a new housing development or whatever, and there's a doctor's surgery in the area, that you'd make sure that you work with partners to ensure there was a surgery that was opened, or you would ensure that there was a travel system in place that would enable them to get to a surgery within 30 minutes.
Yes, so part of that will be what we call travel plans, and Councillor Harvey, you mentioned travel plans. Part of the follow-up of the LTP being adopted we're going to significantly redesign our travel plan options, where we put a lot more onus on the developer to put the facilities in rather than it being reliant on the council doing it. So, yeah.
How will these initiatives be prioritised?
So that will come down to our planning colleagues. So we will put forward recommendations and responses to planning applications, and then it'll be part of their negotiation with the developer. In addition to our responses, you will also have Active Travel England, you'll have NHS for England. lots of stakeholders feed into this, and that's part of the planning team to make those decisions on what is prioritised over others. And then ultimately, if the developer disagrees, there's options of, you know, having external independent review of what is feasible and what isn't feasible. So,
Okay, I've got one more question. Then Councillor Harvey, and then then Councillor Baker, then Councillor Harvey. Your hand was first. How are we going to ensure inclusion in our rural areas for EV rollout?
the government has been really supportive of EV charging grants. So that we can put them out into the rural areas. That's something we do get funding to do, and we need to work with community to work out where those areas that those EV charging points need to go, so we can get them in the right places. Additionally to that, again, it's something that we'll work with developers on to make sure that brand new developments have EV charging points. Some developers now, every single house in a new development has an EV charging port, but also it's us working with community groups such as community travel initiatives, where we can support them in either purchasing an EV charging vehicle or having a charging point available to them. So it's part of that whole process, but yeah, one of the targets for us is to have more EV charging, and that includes us going to private companies, incentivising them to put them in where they are, and also to seek any grant available to us.
Thank you, Councillor Price. Councillor Baker, then Councillor Harvey.
Thank you very much. There's a paragraph in here that just says there are lower numbers of pedestrian and cycle movements across our rural areas, and it will be challenging, is the word, to provide segregated facilities everywhere. I just wondered whether you could replace the word challenging with impossible. Because, I mean, we can say, yes, we want to encourage walking and cycling. There's huge swathes of this county where it's just not possible or feasible or safe. Yeah. Anyway, that's my point.
That's fine.
And the other one was just a quickie. Have we considered producing an app with bus timetables on, or is there one out there already?
Hi, Councillor. So,
thank you.
I stand firmly against the idea of an app, because that's not how people access that kind of data. We've got some work going on in this at the moment, actually, where when people use their phones to do transport things, most people use Google Maps. There are other things that you could use, but generally, so what our take on that is what we would do, what we want to do, and we don't have to do very much to achieve this, is drive our data through Google Maps more and our bus data. And we don't hold the bus data, bus companies hold the bus data. So it's about encouraging that to happen rather than an app. We know there are multiple examples of councils that have spent, you need to spend easily a six-figure sum to develop an app. And Norfolk did a couple, I think they maybe get 100 users maximum. So that it's we do much better to say, well, what are people using to access this thing? How do we make that thing more attuned to what we want out of it? So that's why, I'm giving an example of Google Maps, but that's certainly my take on it, because it costs us no money and people are using that anyway. So what we need to do is much rather than an app that literally no one will use, that will cost us a fortune to set up and will need to be maintained all the time, which will cost us a second fortune. Let's just
the
use
problem
stuff
with
that
me being a
exists.
bit of a Luddite, so
I
didn't understand. But I mean, I don't use buses, but because there is one that runs from Bromyard into the city, comes past the end of my lane, but I don't know when. I've seen it around occasionally, but I don't know what the times are, so I wouldn't know how to find out. That's why I thought an app would be a simple way of doing it. But I didn't realise they were expensive. I thought it's something you just did and press send or something, but anyway.
I would say if you do want to go on Google Maps, the information that the bus transport team put on is really extensive, and it gives you the bus number and links you as well sometimes to the bus provider to give all the times and the route it goes on. So if any constituents ask the question, Google Maps is a great one for them to use, and that's an app in itself.
Yes, I always thought Google Maps was for finding your way in the car to go somewhere, but I live and learn.
Councillor
You can
Pebbody.
use it for all.
I think it's good to recognise the role of the council in sharing that information about bus times, given that we have 9 different operators. And so I'm just pleased to hear that there are initiatives to kind of bring that all is the idea to kind of bring it all into one place, because you can find the information, but you are looking at lots and lots of different operators. And the trouble with those operators is that there's no kind of real time information for most of those operators as well. So if the council had a role in sort of developing that, then I think that would really encourage bus use.
Yeah, David.
Yeah, I mean, that's the point of we only have a role in it. I don't think we're kind of massively in control, because, like you say, there's 9 different operators and they don't answer to us particularly. But so us trying to have a kind of program where we encourage and persuade bus operators to work with us, rather than, because that's all we've got in terms of, you know, our role. We're not a regulator or an enforcer in that. So we're trying to work with them and some digital experts to say, well, how do we make Google Maps, for in this case, the place, because we know people are already using that. So how do we get them to make sure, how do we get them to trust the bus information actually through a provider such as Google? And that's doable. They are obliged to report their bus data to, they're not obliged to report it to us, they are obliged to report it to DFT. So we can drive some of that data through, and hopefully most buses now come equipped with, I forget the technical stuff, but the ability to track them. So if we could bring in all that together is really key. And I think the beauty of using Google Maps really is that you can say where you are and where you want to be, and it works out for you. And it doesn't always work out. Perhaps there's other ways of doing it, but rather than you having to work it out and know all the intricacies of the different buses, actually the idea certainly, and that's is that it does it for you and you can just follow it.
Okay, I've got one more question. I mean, you identified DRT as a possible solution, demand responsive travel. How are you intending to what sort of operational model would you be looking at for that? And are there any plans for pilots, and how would that success of that be measured?
So I come from, in my previous role, I worked in Shropshire Council, who had rolled out DRT. It was successful in some areas and some areas wasn't. So I think one thing we really need to do is view how our neighbouring authorities have found what they found successful, what they haven't. Shropshire being relatively comparable to Herefordshire, I think there'll be a great model for us to review, and the colleagues there are.
Could you just explain what they do for people here that might not be familiar?
Yeah, so basically, one of the old transport manager there used to call it Uber bus. So it's where there either isn't a bus route or the bus route isn't well used, they replace it with a demand responsive bus where people would sign up and ask for the bus to collect them, and it would go the same route, but it would go when it was needed, rather than an empty bus doing routes and routes around the county, which isn't very green and isn't very helpful because it looks awful, doesn't it? So that's what it does. So it will be there for people. There's an app in Shropshire, there's an app for it. Also, people could ring the customer service centre and record it and say, I need to be at the doctor's on this date, at this time, and then they would be able to work out what time the bus would come and collect them. In some areas they're very successful, in some areas they haven't been. So I think it's, rather than say we're definitely going to do it in Hereford, what we can say is we're definitely going to consider it and see what the options are and whether it would work here. And then if it is, you potentially got options for piloting and things like that. But we need funding for that. So whether that comes from BSIP or developers, that's another thing we'd have to consider, because it is very expensive, and more often than not it doesn't make its money back. So it would be a very interesting conversation of where we want to prioritise the money. Is it more frequent buses or DRT that may not actually make its money back? So it's a difficult conversation to have, but definitely one we will be having.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you. I've got a few bits of detail that I'd like to cover. First of all, members of the public raised concerns about the statement that a strategic environmental assessment's been undertaken of all of the. Where is that accessible, and how can we be assured that that stacks up, makes sense?
That will be included in the cabinet paper, and then it will be online for people to view forevermore.
Okay, so this has come to scrutiny without us actually being given sight of that.
Scrutiny was about the consultation of the LTP. I wasn't advised that you needed to see a copy of the assessment, hence why it wasn't provided by officers.
This meeting was called because the consultation was pushed back, wasn't it? And this was it was originally around the consultation on the LTP. We had a previous meeting and then this was pushed back. So we were looking at how the LTP was being consulted on and the results of the consultation.
Okay, well, we haven't received that, obviously, because the consultation's still ongoing. Nothing was provided to us in advance of this meeting about the interim results. We've just had a few bar charts thrown up in your presentation at the front end of this agenda item. The recommendations in the accompanying report for this agenda item says that the committee consider the draft local transport plan and provide recommendations to contribute to the drafting of that plan. So, you know, we've seen the document, but we haven't seen other information that you have available that supports and substantiates it. I'd just like to make those points. The other recommendation is that the committee scrutinise the initial findings of the consultation, which were just flipped up, as I say, on the screen to us very briefly. And Councillor Phillips, for your information, the amount of responses that we've had amount to 0.05% of the population. So assuming that we've got something like 89,000 residents. I think we're not in a position adequately to be able to undertake that element of what it is we're supposed to be doing here, unless committee members want to go back and, you know, look at those charts and consider that to be sufficient information to make any comment or recommendation on the findings of the consultation, because I don't believe we've even had initial findings presented to us. So that's a concern, but clearly members of the public are going to have to wait until the documents go to are released for Cabinet before they're able to make a view on this, or indeed elected members take a view on the strategic environmental assessment. Touching on EV charging, I recognise that there is a programme that's going on at the moment to install EV chargers around and about the place. However, it's almost paying lip service to the process. It's a bit of a box-ticking exercise, because actually the problem in Herefordshire is that we do not have the power grid infrastructure in place to enable meaningful chargers to actually be installed anywhere. You know, in the city, in the market towns, in the rural areas. You know, we're getting chargers installed that dribble electricity into vehicles, which require people with electric vehicles to sit at the charging points for many hours. Hours and hours and hours. Even overnight, some people are finding that their cars are not charging sufficiently for them to be able to, you know, commute to work using these vehicles. So, you know, there's a real deficit here, and there's no mention that I can see, other than an oblique reference to working with partners, about this strategic and significant impediment to us actually having a meaningful EV charging network in Herefordshire, and what we're doing with whichever bit of the system is responsible for the grid infrastructure to get it urgently upgraded and on their capital infrastructure programmes to enable us to have charging points that are the least bit useful to residents and visitors. So I think that's a really serious problem. Ledbury developments, I'll refer you to page 25 of the report, where you're talking about new developments, and you know, seeing as I'm from Ledbury, I can just use that as a really easy example. All that you're talking about there is land north of Ledbury Viaduct. Well, if this document is about where we are now, Ledbury has taken a massive amount of additional unplanned development to the south of the town that was never intended to go there within the planned time frame of the local plan that's been adopted by this council. And I'm startled that the document is not actually recognising the current position in terms of new development in Ledbury, let alone what might be thrown at us next. I'm a little worried that this might mean that officers think that there's even more land to the north of Ledbury Viaduct that's going to get new development on it in the near future, and I'd be interested to have that shared with ward member and the ward members more generally. But this document should be taking account of all of the new development in Ledbury now and how its existence should be being mitigated and people's movement enabled. None of those sites have been allowed to come forward with bus routes going into them. None of them. To begin with, all of these developments, the developers have managed to get through the entire planning system with our planners having their tummies tickled and allowing them to find it acceptable for residents to have to walk to the edge of the development and pick up a bus route there, thereby enabling the developers to have extremely tight road networks within their design layouts, which can't take these big vehicles, and where they're not allowing at the planning permission stage
Sorry, Councillor Harvey.
bus routes to go on there. So that's just a specific example that I'd like to say. How are we assured that the 6 policies that we're now saying is all that's needed in this LTP is going to ensure that this does not happen again, seeing as even with 43 policies in the existing plan, we've been unable to do that. And finally, business travel plans. This transport plan needs to cater for the development that already exists as well as development that is yet to come forward. So hauliers and businesses where they're putting a lot of vehicles onto our roads, how are we going to be ensuring that we get them to have travel plans and transport plans that minimise the impact on our road network of their businesses, and that they also operate in an increasingly sustainable way given all of the climate change pressures?
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. I think you want to come in on that, Fiona?
Yeah, so I think maybe that was a recognition of the failure of the previous plan, even with its 40 plus strategies. It didn't meet the right criteria, and hopefully this new document, even though it's, as you said, you feel it's a bit woolly, actually does have a lot of mechanisms in there that will stop this happening. One of them being travel plans. And since I've joined the council in the last couple of months, one of the big improvements I've seen is that the bus services team are now coming into our planning conversations with planning and with development control to work out what actually they need in the new developments, and that includes the buses going into the new development, and that's stemming from this new local plan, this new local transport plan, which is much more rigid in what it requires from the developer to do. Travel plans, while it would be lovely if every existing business had a travel plan, we will be putting in a supplementary planning document which requires developments and anyone putting in a planning application to have a travel plan. We cannot backdate that, but it will be any new application that goes into planning may be subject to a travel plan depending on what the criteria we put forward are and is. So it will happen, and that is one of the key cornerstones of this new LTP that requires travel plans. And it will be, initially we're going to roll it out with residential, but then also businesses, health and education as well will be looking at having bespoke travel plans.
Councillor Baker?
Yes, thank you. Just a quick one on buses still. In the rural areas, bus stops can be quite a way apart. Are drivers encouraged or even allowed to stop sort of anywhere to pick you up and drop you off at request, just to make life easier? I mean, looking at my situation, the nearest bus stop to me is half a mile away along the A465 towards Burley Gate, and there's no footpaths, and I'm loath to walk up there, so that's one of the reasons I don't use. But opposite where my lane is, there's a big farm entrance. Now the bus could ostensibly just stop there and pick me up and bring me in. I just wondered whether they're allowed to do it.
There's a lot of regulation around where bus stops go and where buses are allowed to stop. So there's a lot of risk assessments and safety requirements. So I do know the bus operators do stop outside the buses. We can't encourage them to do that because of the risk associated with it. What I would say in those instances, if there are locations where the bus stop isn't ideally situated, maybe we look at moving it, or part of the LC whip is that we prioritise footpath to that route, and if it's not possible, then maybe an additional bus stop is needed rather than just having the bus stop wherever, because it can cause
Thank you.
risk.
As much as we'd like to recommend a bus stop at the bottom of your drive, Councillor Baker, it might be slightly beyond us today. Councillor Cornthwaite, then Councillor Pepperdy.
I just want to go back to cycle routes that are great where they are, and yesterday it was a case in point. I came out of my property on Ayleston Hill. The cycle route going is on the left-hand side going into Hereford, and 3 cyclists were using that very rightly. And then it goes up and over the top of Ayleston Hill, and then they have to go onto the footpath to come down Ayleston Hill, so therefore running into children. But what was the worst thing for me is when it gets right to the bottom of Ayleston Hill and you hit the traffic lights, there is nowhere for the cyclists to go, and they were weaving in and out of cars. And that's not the only location where suddenly a cycle route comes to an end and the cyclist does not now know where they're supposed to go and what they're supposed to do and what the priorities are. I wonder if within our future plans we can tell cyclists what they should do at the end of a cycleway, where they should go and what's a safe option, and whether we can join all our cycleways together in some way so that there isn't this danger zone at the end of an existing cycle route.
I definitely agree with that. It is a frustration where cycle routes just come to an end. There is a cycle scheme being done on Ayleston Hill, which will hopefully resolve some of the concerns you've got. But that's where the LC whip will come in and hopefully pick up those areas where the route suddenly stops or there's no safe option for bikes or walking to continue, and the LC whip will pick those up as projects for us to take forward. And when we consult on the LC whip, if we've missed anything, consult with us, give us your comments on what we've missed, and they can be added on, because if we don't know about them, we can't fix them.
Thank you, Councillor Pepperdy.
To pick up briefly on Liz's point, the analysis supporting the transport plan, particularly on the part of Ledbury, is the Market Town Transport Appraisal, and that data was collected in 2016. So I just think perhaps we could look at the data and make sure the data is absolutely up to date, which is informing the transport plan.
Yeah, so one thing since the old LTP was adopted, the council have created a transport model for the county as a whole. That transport model will give pinch points and issues. We are working with the developer at the moment with the revised local plan allocation and considering what impacts that's going to make on our network. So we have contemporary information that will give that guidance on what we should and shouldn't be doing on our network. So we are doing it.
Brilliant. So, and I just had one other comment, which is with the obvious lack of engagement from young people, and also our council's focus on making the county child friendly, that perhaps there should be more reference to the barriers that and the needs and the opportunities for young people, particularly with regard to transport. There are no clear policy solutions proposed to ensure that children and young people can access education, employment, services, recreation without a car. And I think that should certainly feature in the transport plan.
And the feedback we had from the college was very matched exactly what you've just said. Some of the saying it's easier just to get, it's cheaper to get a car with the cost of insurance than it is to get a bus pass or a train pass. So it's definitely something we need to work on. And I think going forward, creating better links with youth councils and the councils in the colleges will really help us to do that. And also as we move into travel plans in schools, that again will help, because we can focus on how to get kids to and from schools actively in a safe way, and I think it'll just build and build and build.
Do we have a TikTok channel?
Not one that I want to be on, but I'm sure if you've got one, we could add something to it.
No, I don't. I just didn't know if there was a way of reaching the younger residents. Maybe
All I know
some of
is
my fellow
Facebook
committee
is no
members, we could
longer
take part in a
used.
TikTok video at some point. Encourage people to take it. Any more questions? Sorry, I'm just lightening it a little bit. Any more questions around this? I am conscious of time. Yes, Councillor Pebbody?
If there is time as well, I would like to see more focus on our climate and ecological emergency. So whether you know the declaration that we've made about the climate emergency should feature somewhere in the local transport plan, and how it kind of I can see has influenced some of the policies within the transport plan, and whether it should be accompanied by a carbon budget for the policies and strategies. I appreciate that's detail that might come later, but
I was quite keen still to see some measurable targets for active travel in the LTP, regardless of the LC whip, and that might be one thing that we do say today.
That's a good recommendation to put in. One, we are working with Rich Vaughan's team on ways to measure the carbon burden that council have and how we can work to reduce that. So it will follow up as additional policies that come in once the LTP is adopted. But I think a recommendation for some kind of carbon debt review would be a really good one.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up there. I think what we're going to do is now is move on to the next item on the agenda. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming today. Thank you for our members online, our visitors online for attending as well. Very, very grateful for your contribution. We're going to move on. I think the Scrutiny Officer is going to move on to the work programme, which is next on the agenda. And then I think we will be able to spend a little bit of time refining our recommendations, at which point the live stream will be suspended briefly while we do that. So I'm going to hand over to the Scrutiny Officer.
Thank you very much, Chair. You have a work programme contained in your papers which runs till September 2025. At your following meeting in July, you intend to look at the tourism and destination management for Herefordshire Council and moving on to gully cleansing, which fulfils council motion for this council, for this committee to be part of this work. At the moment, you have a meeting in September where you've agreed to look at the Hereford City Master Plan and the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, as well as broadband. I don't have any objectives for any of those topics at the moment. So if you do want to continue with those, it would be good to meet to discuss what objectives you have for those particular meetings or those particular topics. I'd note as well that the scrutiny review that was carried out during the course of this year and last year was approved by Council a week last Friday. And fundamental to that review was a request that all committees go back to their work programmes and look at them afresh from a perspective of their objectives rather than from the meetings that we diligently book for you. And I would argue that with your work programme at the state it is at the moment, now is an ideal time to begin that work. You've got plenty of time to do it. You have the luxury of the summer to plan it and consider it whilst you carry on with the day job of your meetings in July and September. So I would urge you to take some time during the summer, during the early summer, to start that conversation. What do you actually want out of this committee? What objectives do you want? What do you feel that the priorities of the local authority are, and how can you work with the local authority to deliver them? All big questions, and I feel that this would be a really good starting point for this committee in determining what its work programme is going forward.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree completely. I think our July meeting is fairly fixed, and we've got some good issues to explore in July. I would suggest, though, that in light of the report that was accepted by Council at the last meeting, that we do meet to review our work programme moving forward, ideally before our July meeting, and we may want to look at what we're doing in September at the same time. I'm happy to propose that. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Cornthwaite, all those in favour? Thank you. Yeah, I think you can vote as a substitute. Yes, that's fine. Okay, so I think we'll. If you could organise that meeting, I'd be very grateful. Thank you.
Tell you something would be useful. Would be a list of things that we can scrutinise.
They're all online.
Picking them out of the air.
It's all online. Councillor Wilkie.
If you take a look at the Constitution, I think it's top of my head, section 2. There's a full list of the remit of every single committee.
If you just Google Connected Community Scrutiny Committee, Herefordshire Council, it will take you straight to it, and you can see the whole list. It's all there. It's quite easy to get to. Right. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask for the live feed to be suspended while we consider our recommendations both for both topics that were discussed today. Thank you. Live stream has started again. Can I ask the scrutiny officer to go through the recommendations, please?
Thank you, Chair. I will read out both sets of recommendations, allowing a vote for the first set in between. So the first set of recommendations relate to the Cultural Strategy 2019 to 2029, and they read as follows. A. Herefordshire Council formally endorses the renewed Cultural Strategy 2025 to 2029 and the key findings of the Fifth Sector Report. Herefordshire Council. B. Herefordshire Council to support Herefordshire Cultural Partnership to produce an implementation plan to deliver the renewed Cultural Strategy 2025-2029. C. Herefordshire Council ensures that there is a dedicated officer to work with the partnership to produce and deliver the strategy's implementation plan. D. Herefordshire Council to ensure the updated cultural strategy is reflected in economic development and health and social care delivery, including the involving Talk Community Network. E. Herefordshire Council highlight the Cultural Strategy 2025 to 29 to town and parish councils and encourage engagement and support for local initiatives. And F. Herefordshire Council assist with the development and promotion of co-working and creative hub spaces for creatives to access shared resources and facilities to support development of new culture-based businesses in Herefordshire.
Thank you. I'm happy to propose these as set recommendations. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Cornthwaite, all those in favour? Thank you, that's unanimous. Thank you, Committee. I now ask the Scrutiny Officer to read the recommendations on the LTP.
Thank you, Chair. They are as follows. A. That the draft local transport plan is reviewed to ensure alignment with existing council plans and strategies. B. That the local transport plan gives particular consideration to the needs of children and young people. C. The duration of the local transport plan is kept in alignment with the local plan and transport strategy to which it applies, namely 2016 to 2031. D. Herefordshire Council work to increase the number of residents taking part in the local transport plan consultation as a matter of urgency, extending the consultation to 30th of June to all members of the public. E. The policy wording of the local transport plan is tightened to ensure that it is meaningful and capable of being applied. F. The local transport plan recognises the full extent of existing new developments, for example Ledbury, and the infrastructure improvements necessary to accommodate this. G. The local transport plan should include targets for the implementation of active travel measures. And H. The local transport plan recognises the inability of the power grid network to meet the needs of fast EV charging points.
Thank you. We'll move these as one. I'm happy to propose all of these. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Cornthwaite, all those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you, Committee. Moving on to item 10, the date of the next meeting. I confirm the next meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, the 8th of July, 2025 at 2 p.m. That concludes the business of today's meeting. Thank you, everybody, for your attendance. Thank you.